What's going on, guys? The time has finally come for Ganyu's introduction to Genshin Impact. I've been saving Primo Gems for nearly 2 months for Ganyu, and honestly could not be happier with everything her kit has to offer. Ganyu is an extremely versatile cryo archer that can fill both the main DPS role with her charge shot mechanics as well as the sub DPS or support role with the potential for 100% uptime on her elemental burst. In this video, I'll be discussing the various components of Ganyu's kit and how to build and play Ganyu to ensure all of these components synergize together. As usual, this discussion will be complemented with video, which will help you to understand exactly how Ganyu works with the various teams, artifacts, and weapons that are her best in slot. The community has already determined artifact sets and weapons that work well for Ganyu. In this video, I'll provide recommendations for artifact main stats and substats for the weapons and artifact sets that you have so that you can put together your best build. The interactions between Ganyu's passive talents, best weapons, as well as the new Blizzard Strayer artifact set are more complicated to understand than for some other characters. If you don't want to worry about these things, Ganyu will put up high numbers regardless, but if you're like me, you may be confused why your charge shots seem to always do different amounts of damage, and what you can change in your build, teams, and playstyle to best optimize Ganyu. First, let's briefly discuss Ganyu's kit, as this will aid in determining how to best play Ganyu. Ganyu is a cryo archer whose main damage focus is charge shots, as well as long duration cryo application and damage with her elemental burst. The stat that she gains with Ascension is crit damage, and in my opinion, this greatly determines her optimum builds. Her normal attack consists of a total of 6 hits. The scaling on her non-charged shots is one of, if not the lowest of all the archers in the game. This is made up for in her charge shot damage. She has 2 levels of charge shot, the first which deals elemental damage typical to all other archers, with the second level, known as the Frostflake Arrow, dealing initial cryo damage which is slightly more than the level 1 charge shot, followed by an AoE attack which deals over 1.5 times more damage than the initial hit. Charging the level 2 arrow from level 1 takes less than half a second, making it justified to use essentially every time. In testing how crit hits work with the Frostflake Arrow, we can see that the crit of the Frostflake Arrow and its bloom are independent of each other. We can also see that the bloom AoE crits separately for each enemy it hits, dealing either 4k or 13k damage for my current build. Ganyu's second talent, Trail of the Qilin, is a taunt similar to Mona's or Amber's and deals cryo damage upon cast and upon destruction. The HP of the taunt scales with Ganyu's and lasts a maximum of 6 seconds. Even though this talent is worded like it is a cleanse, it does not cleanse debuffs from Ganyu upon cast. As seen in the clip shown, the skill can crit separately upon cast and upon destruction. Ganyu will receive 2 energy particles at the beginning and end of the skill only if it comes into contact with enemies. It is therefore advisable to place the skill close to enemies to inflict cryo and charge her burst. In total, this skill does less damage at talent level 6 than the bloom from her Frostflake Arrow. However, because Ganyu is so squishy and sensitive to interruption, this skill does fit very well into her kit. Ganyu's elemental burst is what makes her sub DPS and support skills possible. Her burst lasts 15 seconds with a 15-second cooldown, meaning with the proper energy recharge and team comp, her burst can have 100% uptime. The only other character I can think of with 100% burst uptime is Noelle, but she is limited by not being able to generate her own energy. Each icicle that drops can individually crit. Some of the icicles drop in random locations while others will target enemies. These icicles deal AoE cryo damage, and therefore, much like Ganyu's Frostflake Bloom, will benefit greatly from grouping enemies. We see this in the clip shown, with grouped enemies taking several times more damage than isolated enemies. Ganyu's first passive talent increases crit rate of her Frostflake arrows by 20% for 5 seconds after firing a Frostflake arrow. What this means is that if you're continuously firing Frostflake arrows, you're getting a 20% gain in crit. This is mostly useful if Ganyu is being used as a main DPS, as it allows you to invest more heavily into crit damage because most of your damage will be from these Frostflake arrows. Ganyu's second passive grants a 20% cryo damage bonus to party members within her burst. This applies to Ganyu as well. In the clip shown, we can see that Ganyu does increased damage while standing in the AoE with the enemy in the AoE, and while standing in the AoE with the enemy outside of the AoE. Ganyu does not do increased damage while standing outside of her burst and hitting opponents inside of it, which in some ways justifies the massive size of her AoE. We have seen a ton of videos on YouTube comparing various weapons for Ganyu. In general, Ganyu can deal great damage as a main DPS and support with the majority of bows currently available. The specific bows to avoid are the craftable compound bow, which has a physical damage secondary stat, and rust, which decreases damage from aimed shots. For a main DPS role, the consensus seems to be that Amos is her best in slot as expected, and that in general the 5-star weapons are better than the 4-star weapons. The Amos bow excels because of the passive, which not only increases normal and charge shot damage, but gives an additional flight time damage bonus, catering to her aim shot DPS playstyle. Skyward Harp is still an excellent choice for a DPS or support role in my opinion, because of the high base attack and crit rate and crit damage supplied by the weapon. If I had either of these bows, they would be my bow of choice. Let's look at the other bows that are available now that I like, and which role they are best for. I'm excluding 3-star bows from this list because Ganyu deserves better, guys. The bows we'll discuss are the Prototype Crescent, Blackcliff Warbow, Viridescent Hunt, Favonius Warbow, and the Stringless. The Prototype Crescent has attack main stats and substats and a passive which increases attack for 10 seconds after hitting a weak spot. I wanted to test the passive on this weapon to see if I could proc this mid-burst. What I found was that the 36% attack increase is on top of the base attack and not total attack, and that once her burst is cast, no additional damage is dealt. Because this bow relies on aim shots on weak points, it is best for a main DPS role. The Blackcliff Warbow is similar to the Crescent, but with a crit damage substat. The passive provides an increase in attack with kills, up to a 36% increase in attack for 30 seconds. Although the increase in attack is the same as the Crescent, I believe that this is a good weapon for a main DPS or support. Because Ganyu's burst has potentially 100% uptime, she can be the source of kills with her burst, and the increase in attack can apply to the next time her burst is cast. However, for a main DPS, I think that the Crescent has an easier and more consistent passive to proc. The Viridescent Hunt provides a crit rate substat and a passive that groups enemies and deals physical damage. This is my least favorite of the three, but can still work well primarily in a main DPS role, especially because both her burst and Frostflake Arrow deal AoE damage that is greatly enhanced by grouping enemies. If you did the Ganyu test run, MiHoYo equipped her with the Favonius Warbow, and we saw that she still hit high damage numbers. This is actually the only Favonius weapon I like, and have it equipped on Diona in the absence of a sacrificial bow. The bow has an energy recharge secondary stat and grants Ganyu energy with crit hits. Ganyu is one of the few support characters I would build with crit rate because of her crit damage ascension boost, and therefore I think this is the best character in the game for this bow. The Stringless is an amazing bow for support Ganyu, especially in a melt comp, because her burst will undoubtedly proc melt, even if not intentional, and the elemental mastery will help the damage when that occurs. Additionally, the bow will increase her already high burst damage by 24% at refinement rank 1. I'm running Ganyu as a main DPS with the Prototype Crescent. I'd swap her almost in a heartbeat, but I'm happy with the Crescent for my Blizzard Strayer build. I would likely choose the Blackcliff or Viridescent for the other artifact sets we'll talk about in the next section, because their substats let you get away with less perfect artifacts. For a main DPS role, there are 3 main artifact sets I would consider for Ganyu for maximum charge shot damage. These are the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, Wanderer's Troop, and Retracing Bullide sets. The Blizzard Strayer 4-piece set will increase cryo damage by 15% and provide additional crit rate up to 40% depending if enemies are affected by cryo or frozen. The Wanderer's Troop 4-piece set will increase elemental mastery as well as charge shot damage by 35%. The Retracing Bullide 4-piece set will increase normal and charge attack damage by 40%. My ideal artifact set of choice would be the Wanderer's Troop, but this set is notoriously difficult to farm because it only drops from bosses and at a very low rate. I would therefore prioritize the set that you have that has the best main stats and substats. There was a lot of talk ahead of Ganyu's release about not needing to build crit because hits on weak points are a guaranteed crit. However, we have seen that even weak point hits can result in a bloom that does not crit, and this is where the bulk of her damage comes from. Therefore, building crit for Ganyu is very important. I'm currently running the Blizzard Strayer 4-piece set and have a crit rate of 29% and crit damage of 195%. In my opinion, this is the easiest set to run on Ganyu and works pretty well for both a main DPS and support role. With cryo uptime at 100%, I'm getting 20% crit rate from this set, 15% crit rate from cryo resonance with Diona on my team, and 20% crit rate from her second passive on charged shots, putting my crit rate near 85% for charged shots and 65% for her burst. Even in a support role, if you're running a freeze comp or cryo resonance, you can likely get a decent crit rate out of this set with artifact substats alone. With the Wanderer's Troop set, I'd prefer to run either a weapon with a crit rate secondary stat or a crit rate circlet to reduce artifact substat RNG. At level 80, the Viridescent Hunt will provide 25% crit rate, and with the Cryo Resonance, assuming my current artifact substats, I'd be at 70% crit rate, which is a comfortable value, allowing me to utilize a crit damage circlet. Alternatively, the Blackcliff weapon with the crit damage secondary stat will allow you to use a crit rate circlet and have a higher crit rate at the expense of some crit damage. I would suggest the same builds for the Retracing Bolide artifact set as for the Wanderer's Troop set. I would choose this set if running a Geo support unit, as it is easier to farm than Wanderer's Troop. In theory, this set will give similar DPS potential from charge shots, assuming that you can maintain 100% uptime on shields, and it makes sense on Ganyu because of her low HP, and because shields will allow her to avoid disruption, which is critical to maintaining DPS with the long time it takes to charge the Frostflake arrow. For main DPS substats, I'd prioritize crit damage, crit rate, and attack percent. As far as support builds go, there are a few options I would consider which are similar to other support characters. Ganyu's support potential comes from her burst uptime and cryo application and damage. Obviously, the field is more open for support builds, so these are just some suggestions. The first set would again be the Blizzard Destroyer 4-piece set. Although this isn't my top choice, in my opinion it is versatile and allows Ganyu to flex roles without having to change artifact sets. For the support build, I would run crit rate on the circlet if using a weapon without a crit rate substat and without cryo resonance or crit damage otherwise. The second set would be a 2-piece Blizzard Destroyer and 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. This will provide the maximum damage from her burst. Because each icicle in her burst can crit, I would likely build a crit rate circlet to take advantage of the crit damage already built into her kit. This set is more selfish than the third one, as it'll maximize the damage caused by Ganyu as opposed to your main DPS. The third set would be a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. I would recommend this artifact set in a melt comp with someone like Diluc or Klee, as the damage they get from performing melt will be amped even further beyond the already 2x multiplier. I also like this set with a physical carry such as Razor or Kaching, who will use Ganyu's cryo application to perform superconduct and further reduce enemies' physical resistance. My recommended weapon for support Ganyu is the Favonius Warbow, because the passive works so well with her kit. This is because the burst hits so many targets and is always up, that with some crit built into her kit, the passive will activate almost constantly on cooldown, and the energy recharge substat allows you to fully invest artifacts into damage. The artifact main stats I would recommend for support are HP, attack, attack percent, cryo damage bonus, and crit rate or crit damage. The substats I would recommend are crit rate, crit damage, and energy recharge. If you're finding that your energy recharge does not allow constant burst uptime, it can be worth running energy recharge on the sands and sacrificing damage for increased burst uptime, which is likely more valuable to most team comps. With that said, I'd like to briefly touch on team comps. For DPS Ganyu, there are two reactions I would prioritize, which are Melt and Freeze. While the reverse Melt reaction with Ganyu is the trigger will deal less damage than Pyro applied to Cryo, because of how the Pyro debuff is applied by the current characters in the game, a single charge shot with Ganyu as the trigger will result in Melt on both the initial hit and the bloom. My favorite unit for applying Pyro is Xiangling, because she can apply Pyro continuously while off the field for a long duration. While this playstyle is risky for Ganyu because of the proximity she needs to maintain in order for Xiangling's ultimate to apply Pyro to enemies, it nets more damage than some other team comps. Alternatively, Ganyu shines as a main DPS in a freeze comp. The utility of the freeze comp is staying protected while being able to lock enemies in a single position. Good units for applying Hydro are Xingqiu and Mona, because they can both apply Hydro over a relatively long duration with Xingqiu's burst and Mona's skill and burst. The issue with keeping uptime on freeze is encountered though, as freezing enemies only allows Ganyu to get off a single Frostflake arrow. While Xingqiu's burst is up, alternating regular and charge attacks with Ganyu will keep enemies frozen, but is limited to a single target. Mona can apply Hydro with her skill and burst in an AoE, but the duration is limited to 1 or 2 charged shots. Using a CC character such as Sucrose or Venti that can swirl water greatly helps in keeping freeze uptime. In addition to Sucrose and Venti's extremely beneficial CC for Ganyu's AoE charge shot and burst damage, if they're equipped with the Viridescent Venerer set, they can swirl Cryo and reduce enemies' resistance to Cryo by 40%, allowing Ganyu to deal significantly higher Cryo damage. Finally, a shield support unit is almost crucial to maintaining DPS uptime on Ganyu, in my opinion. Diona fills this role extremely well as she shares cryo resonance and can provide healing, but geo support units work just as well. As a support, Ganyu functions extremely well in superconduct comps with a physical DPS carry that can also apply electro, such as Kaching, Razor, or Beidou, because she can apply nearly constant cryo and keep superconduct up 100% of the time. Alternatively, she is possibly the best cryo applicator in the game for a pyro carry such as Diluc to continuously apply melt every time his skills and burst is available. Ganyu also works extremely well in a freeze comp as a support, with Child as the main hydro DPS. That's all I got for you guys today. If you guys found this video helpful, please consider subscribing down below. I put out a Genshin Impact video just like this one every single week. I'll see you guys for the next video. Peace.